Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order when you check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Sports Pictorium Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. If he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL helmet poster. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
He won 2 U.S. Open championships in a row, won 3 Western Opens in a row, won a Masters. Overall, he notched 16 wins in less than 10 years and then stepped away from the game, basically never to be heard from again. He was the most dominant golfer of his time, and so few remember this Hall of Famer. Next, on Sports Forgotten Heroes, the story of one of golf's greats, Ralph Guldahl.
This is Sports Forgotten Heroes, a tribute to the stars who shaped the games we love to watch and the games we love to play. Stars who provided us with many thrills, but when their time was up, they faded away. We'll take a look back at their spectacular careers, their moments of fame, even if it was just for one season or just one game. And now, here's your host, Warren Rogan.
Hello, and once again, welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes. So glad you could join us for a look back at one of the most phenomenal careers in the history of golf, the career of Ralph Guldahl. And joining the podcast in just a moment for this stroll down memory lane will be Tony Parker, golf historian from the World Golf Hall of Fame and Museum in St. Augustine, Florida. Last time Tony was here, we talked about Willie Anderson, the only man to win 3 U.S. Open golf championships in a row. This time around, we're going to talk about Ralph Guldahl, one of a select few who have won the U.S. Open 2 years in a row. Guldahl's career is quite remarkable. Bursting on the scene in 1931, he won his first tournament before he turned 20 years old, the Santa Monica Open. But after just a few years of playing, frustration took over. Something many of us Sunday golfers can relate to. But the health of a young son and finances were just too much for Ralph, and he walked away from the game. Hard to believe for someone as talented and as young as he was. But the golf bug was just too much to ignore. He left the game in 1935, but returned in 1936, and he just took over the sport, winning 13 times over a 5-year stretch. Now, before we get to Ralph's story, a friendly reminder, you can follow Sports Forgotten Heroes on Twitter at SportsFHeroes. Look for our page on Facebook or follow us on the web at sportsfh.com. Drop us an email and let us know how we're doing or who you think we should do a show on, or give us a rating on iTunes. Also, don't forget that Sports Forgotten Heroes is sponsored by Audible. With Audible, you get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/sportsfh. So, if you don't have time to sit and read and you're running around but you still want to enjoy a great book, Audible is a terrific way to do so. There's almost 200,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And Audible is a great way to show your support for Sports Forgotten Heroes. Give it a try free at www.audibletrial.com/sportsfh. No obligation. You don't have to pay for a thing. So, Ralph Guldahl. He won the U.S. Open in 1937 and 1938, 3 Western Open championships, 1936, 1937, and 1938, and the Masters in 1939. He made 3 Ryder Cup teams as well. And joining Sports Forgotten Heroes to talk about Ralph is Tony Parker from the World Golf Hall of Fame and Museum. Hey, Tony, welcome back to Sports Forgotten Heroes. I'm so glad you could join us once again. Hey, so what's new in St. Augustine and the World Golf Hall of Fame and Museum?
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got things going on all the time, as you well know. Our newest exhibit is the Players Experience, where we really celebrate the Players Championship, go through the history, have a wall-to-wall display where our fans can stand and watch the 17th hole and feel the heartbeat.
Wow.
We've also just had our induction, and so we have Meg Mallon, Lorena Ochoa, Henry Longhurst, Davis Love III, and, of course, Ian Woosnam. And they have a big display in our show hall. But our newest exhibit that's about to open in June is called Tales from the Collection. And there we're going to be showing a lot of unique items, such as an original painting by Andy Warhol of Jack Nicklaus, along with young Tom Morris's putter that he used in 1868 when he won his first Open Championship, first of four. So a lot going on.
That sounds awesome. Tell me a little bit more about the Players exhibit and the 17th hole. That sounds really interesting.
Well, it is. When you first walk in, we talk about the history of it. And, of course, 11 Hall of Fame members have won the Players. Jack Nicklaus is the only one who's won it 3 times so far. And, of course, we highlight the new winner plus the ones who've won previously. But then in the second section, it's 1,800 square feet of exhibition space. When you walk in, we've got the $1 check that Dean Beeman paid for the 412 acres that is now TPC Sawgrass. We've got all kinds of things, memorabilia there. But you stand on a circle, and a wall-to-wall video begins just telling you about the 17th hole, and then it has a film of how it builds up the pressure, and then it shows a couple of things there, and it's really, really good. Of course, we got some great quotes. You know, John Mahaffey said it's the easiest par 5 on the golf course. Mark Calcavecchia said, it's like having a root canal. I'm calling it for a root canal. You feel bad all day because, sooner or later you got to get to it. So it kind of builds the pressure there, but there are great quotes in there. And then we've got a little quiz.
Yeah.
Some question about how many holes and ones on 17 and birdies and things like that. What's the highest score ever? It's a really cool exhibit, and it's gone down extremely popular with our guests.
Very cool. I'm going to definitely make my way up there to check it out. Hey, so last time you were here, we spoke about who I think is a real unknown, a man who won 4 U.S. Open championships, Willie Anderson.
Yeah.
And today, another former U.S. Open champion, a guy who also won the Masters, but a guy who basically walked away from the game when he was still capable of winning, Ralph Guldahl. Can you tell us a little bit about Ralph and what made him so special with a golf club in his hand?
Well, I'll tell you, he's a self-taught guy. He's from Dallas, Texas. Of course, he was born just a year before Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson, Sam Snead. But he kind of came on. He won his first tournament when he was 19 years old. He turned pro in 1930, won in 1931. So young kid. And then he played for a couple of years, but then when his son is born, Ralph Jr., his son was not very well. And so Ralph just walked away from the game for a couple of years, was a used car salesman for a while. But then he was asked to design a little golf course in Kilgore, Texas, and that gave him the bug again. And he comes back in 1935, and he comes in second at the Open in 1935, second in the Open in 1936. Then he wins the U.S. Open in 37 and 38.
Wow.
He won 3 Western Opens in a row in 1936, 37, 38. And then you get to the Masters in 1937, 38. He came in second at the Masters. And then he wins it in 1939. And then that's it.
And then he walked away again.
Yeah. He a couple of things he said about that. He said, one, he was just tired of life on the road. And 2, he was concerned about his family. But then later he said that he never had a tremendous desire to win. And I don't see that because, he from 1936 to 1940, he absolutely dominated the PGA Tour. He had 16 wins.
Right.
And when you're talking about either first or second for 4 or 5 years in a row in 2 of the major championships, come on. Nobody has done better than that.
Do you think that he was sort of masking a different reason as to why he walked away, or was it just because what he said? I mean, that's really hard to believe that he walked away from the game because, he just didn't have this desire to win, when that's what he did. He won.
And he won big, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I kind of think, and this is kind of a prevalent attitude, when he was asked to write that instructional book, and he saw films of his swing, which was kind of unorthodox. I mean, he had power, no question about that, but it was an unorthodox swing. And then he started trying to work on his swing, and he pretty much lost his game. I mean, we call it paralysis by analysis. When he started working on the game, instead of being the natural golfer that he was, he started trying to be more of a technique golfer, and I think he just overanalyzed everything and lost his game.
Interesting. It's so funny when you read things and then you hear things, and it's not always the same. I read where he walked away from the game of golf the first time around because he was really frustrated with the game, not because of a newborn child, but because of just absolute frustration, particularly what happened to him in the 1933 U.S. Open after coming back from 9 shots down with 11 to play. He missed a 4-foot putt to force a playoff. And
on the 18th hole, that's right.
Yeah, so tell me about that.
Of course, I mean, when he won the U.S. Open and he beat Snead by a couple of strokes, and when he holed out on the 15th hole, and when he won the Masters by holding out from a bunker on the 18th hole, he's got the game. And as you say, he made a charge, absolutely made a charge in 33. But then when you got a 4-foot putt, I don't know if it was the pressure that got to him, because remember, this is his first time in the big leagues, as it were. And he missed it. And I think just, I'd say this, but kind of like Doug Sanders in 1970 at the Open in St. Andrews, when all the pressure is there, and you've made that putt 1,000 times, and you miss it.
Yeah.
And just, I don't know if you would say just the deflation of the moment or the embarrassment of the moment. How could I miss that? But whatever it was, it absolutely took the wind out of his sails.
And he had, what he did on the course to get to that point is, it's amazing. 9 shots down with 11 to play. What was going on there?
Well, when you start out with birdie eagle, it's not too bad. You kind of set the pace for the day right there. And then to get down to the last hole to force that playoff. Everything's riding on, no matter how well you've played up to that point, everything's riding on that last putt.
Right.
And didn't make it.
So like you said earlier, he won 16 times on tour. His first victory came in 31 at the Santa Monica Open. Then he won again in 1932 at the Arizona Open. At this point, you would think everything's okay, but then he became really frustrated with the game, basically because of the U.S. Open, and going back to what you just said, how he left the game because of a young child. It still doesn't add up, because I could see you leaving the game, but he was giving the game up. He sold his clubs and said, enough is enough. How bad could things have been that he goes to the extent of even selling his golf clubs?
Well, you have to think. Here's a guy that was on the rise. no question about it. He probably wasn't winning as much as he thought he would be. Come on. He's 19, 20, 21 years old. And at that age, you expect to win everything and expect to hold every putt.
Right.
That's just the expectations of a young guy, especially when you've got the talent to win. And obviously, he did, starting in 1935 and 36 all the way up to 1940. When you got the talent and you're not living up to your potential, that gets extremely frustrating.
Sure.
And no doubt, he felt the pressure to win, especially with a new family. I need to win. I need this, and he couldn't close it.
You know, he played in, well, I guess it was sort of like the golden age of golf. Like you had said earlier, he was born a year before Hogan. So he played when it was right around the time that Sam Snead was coming into his own, and guys like Byron Nelson and Ben were emerging. Can you paint a picture for us and tell us what golf was like at the time Ralph played? I mean, most of us know about Snead and Nelson and Hogan, but who else were the champions of the day, and what was it like to play on the PGA Tour back then?
Well, as you know, up until 1930, thanks to Bobby Jones and people like him, the amateur game was kind of premier. And then it was with the advent of people like Gene Sarazen and Walter Hagen that really starts bringing it into the forefront, and the professional golfers now center stage, not the amateur. And it's I don't want to say it's fledgling, because the PGA of America started in 1916, and the USGA had been around since 1895. So it's not new, but for the professional golfers being the household names now, that is new. And I think kind of Bobby Jones kind of opened the door to that, to really put the U.S. Open on the map in the sense of real winners. But you got Gene Sarazen, the real personality, and Walter Hagen, Mr. Confidence himself coming on.
Sure.
And then Ralph kind of slips in there in like I say, 1935, 36, and dominates the place. And now this is before Byron Nelson or Ben Hogan really started making their charge. Byron's not just 39, 40, 41, and then 45 is when he had his great year of 18 wins and 11 in a row. And Hogan, of course, he wins a couple, right on the cusp of the World War II, and then after that, he really takes off. So Ralph is really the one leading the charge. He's the one that's setting the stage for Sam Snead and Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson to come on. So in their case, I hate to say this, but it might have been a good thing that Ralph Guldahl walked away from the game.
When he walked away from the game the first time, you had mentioned that he was a used car salesman. I had also read where he worked as a carpenter in movie studios, and at the time also part of the reason he sold his clubs was for meal money. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, there is. I'd read that as well, that he worked as a carpenter on the movie sets. And, of course, he had moved his family out to California because of a healthier climate for his son.
What was wrong with his son?
I really don't know. All I've read and all I've heard is that he was a bit sickly. And it may have been to do with lungs or whatever, but he was advised by the doctors to take him to California, and he did. And that's probably when he went initially to work at the movie studios as a carpenter, just to make the money to feed the family. And so it's kind of interesting that it's not until 1935 that he's asked to design a course in Kilgore, Texas, a little 9-hole course, that he takes up the clubs again. So there's that gap there. And again, remember, 1935, he's still only 24 years old.
Right.
So it's quite a compliment to ask him to design a golf course.
Yeah, pretty amazing at that age to do that.
It is absolutely amazing. So I think there's a lot more to Ralph Guldahl than history has recorded, because he is the forgotten man. We can talk about his wins, and he's had several, obviously, 3 majors in a 3-year span, including the Western Open, which at that time was considered on par with a major championship.
Right,
he won that 3 times in a row. So if we really put that into context, that's 6 majors in 3 years. That's impressive.
We would say that's Tiger-esque.
Tiger-esque, yeah. I think that's a good way to put that. But from a personal standpoint, we really don't know a whole lot about him. I mean, there's a couple of books that have come out.
Sure.
But I don't think they really cover the man. There's a lot going on with this guy, and I think he has far more talent than he's been given credit for.
Was it designing that course that got him charged again to go back out and try the tour once again, that got his competitive juices flowing?
Well, I think, once you get out and from a golf course design standpoint, if you're a golfer, then you actually think about how you play golf. How would I design this hole that would, A, suit my game and would suit the game of an average golfer? But then the whole time you're thinking in the back of your mind, how would I play this? How could I shoot this? And I think that's kind of sparked this back. I know I can do this. Or if I was playing well, I could do this. And I think that was enough to say, I think I'll brush off the cobwebs and practice on my game a little bit and see how it works out on this new course. And hey, I'm hitting it pretty good. Let's give it another shot. And I'm glad he did.
Yeah, how in the world, when he decided to come back, how in the world did he find his old set of clubs?
Now that you got me, I don't have a clue. I mean, chances are, when we say he sold them, chances are he probably pawned them.
Right.
And went back to the pawn shop, because a lot of guys did that in those days. And there's some stories about him about that kind of stuff, where they pawn them and then go back and get them back when they win some money, and then they put them back when they need some money. Kind of rotating door there.
Sure. And when he did come back, he sought the services of Olin Dutra for help with his game. Why Olin?
Well, Olin, again, is all right. He's not renowned as a fantastic player, but he's a great coach, and he certainly has certain aspects of his game that was quite good. And chances are, I mean, Ralph was probably just good friends with him. From what I understand, Ralph wasn't the life of the party and that kind of thing. And so I imagine he had a few friends that he could count on. And I think Olin was one of them that he trusted. Kind of like when Tiger went to Steve Stricker on some putting. It's just kind of an offhand comment that changed the face of his putting for that game. So every once in a while, it's just a comment here or an observation there that says, "Oh, that's a pretty good idea. Let's give that a shot." So I think it's something along those lines.
And Olin, he wasn't a second-rate golfer or just a teaching professional. He could play, too. I mean, this guy won the 32 PGA, the 34 U.S. Open. Just how good a golfer was Olin Dutra?
Well, see, again, you got to put it into context of who all he was playing against. You've got people that overshadow. Walter Hagen is one. I mean, when he won the PGA 5 times, 4 times in a row, that commanded attention.
Sure.
So you've got guys, even though they're major winners. I hate to bring it right up to context and contemporary times. You got Retief Goosen, who's won the U.S. Open twice, and he's not been invited up to Shinnecock, where he won, to play again. I think he's kind of overshadowed there, or not overshadowed, maybe just overlooked, and because others kind of shine a little brighter. And in Olin's case, that's the case. You've got Gene Saracen, who's really making his mark. You got Walter Hagen, who's really making his mark. And then you still got the lasting aura of Bobby Jones throughout the first 1930s. So it's kind of easy to get lost in the mix. And that's exactly what happened here.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't long before he was cashing in winners' checks again. He won the 1934 Westwood, the 1936 Western Open, which, like you said, some considered to be a major. It was everything just like a major, with the exception of, it didn't have major in its title. Then he wins the 36 Augusta Open, the 36 Miami Biltmore Open. What changed in his game, and was there a change in his game, and was there anything mental there?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head right there, because to be honest with you, I don't think anything changed in his game proper. Because like I say, he was a natural talent, unorthodox swing in a sense, but self-taught. So he knew his swing, he knew how to play. But I think, as Bobby Jones said, championship golf is played on a 5.5-inch course, the space between your ears.
Right.
And I think in Ralph's situation, that's what it was. I think when he started winning in 36, he'd already placed, like I say, he'd placed second, at the U.S. Open in 35. And then he came back in 37-38 at the Masters second. But I think once he had that taste of win at the Western in 36, he said, I can win again.
Uh-huh.
And then he goes to Augusta and he wins at Augusta. All right, I can do this. Now his confidence is being built. And then when he comes into 1937, oh my gosh, here's the Western Open, the U.S. Open, 2 majors in 1 year. 38, the U.S. Open, the Western Open again,
right.
2 majors in a year. And then 39, Great Greensboro, and then the Masters. I mean, he's on a roll. He's four big wins, in 1939.
And like you said, he was also a runner-up a couple times in these big tournaments.
Exactly right, yeah. Yeah, five runner-up. In his career, he was second place 19 times.
Wow.
And we're only talking in a short, what we're talking not even a real decade. We're talking 7 years.
Yeah, because he took a couple years off.
That's right. So in 7 years, we're talking 19 second-place finishes, 16 wins. And 3 of those are majors, or like I say, if you want to throw the Western in there, 6 main elite championships he wins. So, I mean, what can you say? And really from 36 to 40 is the years. That span, he was just, nobody could beat him, really.
What was it about the water in Texas that produced such great golfers like Hogan, Nelson, and Ralph Guldahl?
I wished I knew. I'll be honest with you. And it's not just these early guys. There's some other guys coming out of Texas today. A couple of young players that are pretty doggone good. I don't know what it is. It's maybe, well, who knows? It's I wish I did know. I might move out to Texas.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Maybe something in the water and the air.
And like you said, he was self-taught. Talk about that for a moment. How does one teach themselves to play this game at such a high level like that?
Well, it's like, Sam Snead the same way. Ben Hogan, as you well know, the same way. They as my dad used to say, it would get in that crawl. You go out and you see something that is wrong with your swing, and you work on that. Mm-hmm. And if you're a natural, if you have the natural athlete, the natural ability, then you actually have the wherewithal to start working on that aspect of your game. And that's what Snead did. As you know, that's what Hogan did. Mm-hmm. And Guldahl, obviously, the same way. He would work on his game, his swing. I was in Lanzarote a few years ago, and I came across I played some golf with a professional from Germany, and he was a teaching pro, and he said, I don't try to correct people's swings. I find their natural swing and build their game around that swing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, okay. So then when you look at these top pros, I mean, look at Jim Furyk's swing. Can anybody duplicate that swing? But when he comes to striking the ball, he is square on the ball, and he hits it very well.
Right.
John Daly, who a lot of people, they know about his long distance, but he has a great touch around the greens.
Yep.
And if you look at his swing, you think, really? But the result is what pays off. So there are these guys that just have that ability, and Ralph obviously was one who knew his game. Didn't play anybody else's game. He knew his game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's partly what led to his downfall is when he started analyzing and trying to correct the unorthodox swing that he had, because it was almost a straight back lift and then power through. And he started trying to correct that, and then of course when you start fiddling with something that works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Tell us about his game. What were his strengths? What were his weaknesses before he got to that point where he started to fiddle with it, like you were just talking about?
Well, again, off the tee, a power hitter. What was it? Sam Snead said something about when he was on his game, nobody could beat him, and that's obvious. It's obvious from his result.
Yeah.
Because he beat Snead twice in two major championships, right at the last moment there, but. I think, his putting, he was good at putting. I won't say he's one of the best putters, but he knew how to close it out. He did hit some shots. Obviously, since he won 2 of the majors by holding out from bunkers. I'd have to say his short game and bunker play must have been pretty doggone good. About on par with maybe Gary Players,
Wow, that's saying a lot.
Or even Sam Snead's.
That's saying a lot.
And that is saying a lot. Yeah, it is. But obviously it worked for him.
So, 1937, of course, was his big year. He wins the U.S. Open. A short time later, he wins the Western Open for the second straight time, a tournament, as we've said a couple times now, that he would win 3 straight years. He was rolling on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Besides winning the Open in 1937, that tournament really played a pivotal role in how the game of golf is played today, at least when it comes to how many clubs you can carry in your bag.
That's
it was
right.
reported that he carried as many as 19. Why
right.
and what were they?
Well, I'll tell you, we can go beyond that. When Lawson Little won the U.S. Amateur, he had 31 clubs in his bag.
I couldn't imagine being a caddy for those guys.
No, 31 clubs in his bag, and there was some pros carrying as many as 35. Lawson Little carried 7 wedges in his bag. Bill Mickelson's got nothing on him. But yeah, Ralph Guldahl had 19 clubs in his bag. And of course, as of January 1st, 1938, the number of clubs was 14. So he had to cut the number down to 14 from there. It's like, I won't get into all the history of the evolution of the golf clubs and stuff, but when steel shafts came on board and switched from steel to hickory pretty much right around 1930 or so, they didn't have the torque. They didn't have the flex in them. They were like triple X stiff shafts.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to hit the ball 100 yards, at that time I'd hit maybe a 9-iron. If I wanted to hit 105 yards, I'd maybe hit a 8.5 iron.
Wow.
Maybe 8 3/4 iron.
Wow.
So by the time you get to 1938, January 1st, when the USGA and the RNA, and I can give you the background on that a bit, for a man named Robert Harris, the RNA kind of brought that up to 36. But anyway, they cut the numbers back down to 14. Now, that's good for the caddies, obviously. But for a lot of the pros, they really had to adjust and adapt their game.
Why 14? Where did that number 14 come from?
Well, there's a lot of discussions about that. There's, one that came out. Well, it started, like I say, a fellow by the name of Robert Harris, 1936, the RNA, at one of the rules meeting. They were talking about that the skills of the game are being diminished by the advent of these steel shafts. That now to hit a ball, you just grab another club. For instance, 31 clubs. So we need to put skills back in the game. And how we're going to do that? Well, like now we talk about the limiting the golf ball.
I was just going to say that, the golf ball.
Well, that was the discussion too. 1924. Gosh, we could spend all day talking about this kind of stuff. But this is right up my alley. In 1924, they tried to standardize the size of the golf ball. And the USGA was 1.68 inches. The RNA said, no, 1.62 inches. Now, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. We're talking about 0.06 inches. But if you believe Jack Nicklaus, he said, the smaller ball would travel 50 yards further. Same weight, different design. So in 1936, they started the discussions on what to do. Let's limit the number of clubs. Now, Craig Wood, when he played in the 1934 Masters, he had 28 golf clubs in his bag.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, 28 clubs in his bag. So, some say, well, some manufacturers were already producing, roughly 14 clubs, the putter, 3 woods or 4 woods, and then the irons. Although I have seen a 17 iron.
Wow.
We got the 1 through sand wedge now, of course, but the 1 through 9, I've seen 10 irons, 11 irons, and I've even seen, I think we actually have one here in the museum, a 17 iron.
A 17 iron, I just couldn't even imagine.
Exactly right.
It's got to be almost an L shape.
Well, gosh, yeah, I might even be more than that. I have to go back and look at it. But I know, like, Johnny Miller had an 11 iron in his bag. So I think that's probably like a gap wedge, I would think, something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just, so 14 was a number. Now it's been intimated to me, and I can't verify it because I actually tried to locate people who were on the committee when they made those decisions. And the USGA came out. Part of their rationale was that mechanics, rather than, we would say technology, mechanics have overtaken the skills of the game. So they have to limit the number of clubs. And 14, well, somebody said, well, how many clubs did Craig Wood have? Well, 28. Half that number works for us. But who knows? I mean, none of the guys who were on those committees are still around, and we can't ask them.
Well, the USGA reduces the amount of clubs you can have in your bag to 14. That didn't affect Ralph. He went out and won the U.S. Open again in 1938, this time at Cherry Hills, to become just the fourth man to win the Open in consecutive years. How were the U.S. Open courses set up back then as compared to the famous setups of today? And what was it about Ralph's game that helped him play so well in the U.S. Open?
Well, you got to remember now, he went from 19 clubs to 14, and he wins the 1938 Open at Cherry Hills by 6 strokes. So apparently,
was it even
cutting
close?
down on the number of clubs didn't affect him too badly. But no, I mean, again, golf course maintenance at the time was a lot different than it is today. I mean, today, the greens are manicured to the nth degree. We can't say that was true then. Fairways are immaculate, and of course, you got the first cut of rough and then the second cut of rough. Not so much then. So, to be honest with you, I think the skills of the players then would give these players today a real run for their money.
Could they hit the ball like the guys do today? I guess if they had the same kind of equipment.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, Sam Snead certainly hit drives over 300 yards, and we're talking in the 1940s here.
Wow.
And it was well known. And you got to remember, they're playing Bellata golf balls, which I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Bellatas, the wound ball with very soft cover.
Yeah, I made a couple of them smile.
Yeah, smile. That's right, the Bellata smile. So and two, not all of them held their shape. So if you're talking about guys who can roll as Guldahl did a 60-foot putt in the 1937 Open, that's saying something. I mean, you can say, well, that's a lucky putt. Yeah, it could very well be. Bobby Jones had done it a number of times. But these guys, I think, and I don't want to disparage today's game in any shape, form, or fashion, but these guys had to know their own distances, had to read their own greens in the sense of which way it's going to break, which way it's going to roll. It wasn't until Dean Beeman really came along and started doing out the yardage where he'd walk off the yardage and make notes of that, and very statistical. And then, of course, you got the yardage for every tournament. Then you didn't. You had to know your own yardage. You had to know how far you were going to hit it. You had to know that you would walk off the course. Yeah, sure. But you had to, I think, to be honest with you, it was more of a thinking man's game then than it is today.
Hey, when we think of guys who have won multiple U.S. Open championships, the names that come to mind are, of course, Hogan and Nicklaus, Woods, maybe Lee Trevino, Bobby Jones, the guy we talked about last time you were here, Willie Anderson, Billy Casper. There are a few. But few would be hard-pressed to say Ralph Guldahl. And he won 2 in a row, 37 and 38. Why do you think he is so lightly regarded by so many in the annals of golf history?
Because his star shone very brightly for a very brief time. So he really wasn't around long enough. I mean, again, second at the Open 35-36, wins it 37-38. Second at the Masters 37-38, wins it 39. So there's that really 3-year, I mean, we can push it to 4-year window to where he was the man. But then World War II intervenes.
Mm-hmm.
And golf is not played for 4 years. And then coming back, that's when you really see the rise of Hogan and Nelson. Of course, Nelson quits in 49,
right,
47. But then you see these guys coming in, and then in the 1950s you had the advent of television, 1958, 59, and that's kind of supersedes. So now, I mean, there was something I saw on Twitter just today. If Tiger wins another major, would you consider that the greatest comeback? No. Look at Hogan,
Yeah.
In a near fatal crash, and he comes back and he wins 5 majors after almost dying in a car wreck.
3 in 1 year.
That's right, exactly right, 1953. So, people say, Hogan who? Well, not me. I know exactly who Hogan is, But that's it. We're fleeting. We know the stars of our age. If we look at baseball, for me, it's Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris,
right,
these guys.
Right.
And of course, there's greater stars beyond. But for me, I know these guys.
How amazing was it that Ralph could walk away from the game for the period of time that he did, and then come back, even though he was still young, but come back after having put the clubs down for that period of time, come back and not only win, but win at the rate that he won and the tournaments that he won. I mean, again, 37 and 38, he wins the U.S. Open. 36, 37, and 38, the Western. And 1939, and we really haven't even discussed that, the Masters. I mean, that's really saying something.
Well, it is. And the thing is, there's all I can say is it was his time. He got in his zone and he played lights out from start to finish. And again, Paul Snead, who never won the U.S. Open, partly because of Guldahl, and then the Masters in 1939. Snead is in there and really pleased, and all of a sudden, here's Guldahl. He holes out from the bunker on 18 to beat him by 1 stroke. I mean, he probably felt like Greg Norman did.
I was just thinking of Norman at the PGA and the Masters.
That's right. There's you got to just take it with a grain of salt, and that's one thing I always liked about like Walter Hagen. He said, "Look, I expect to make 7 mistakes in a round of golf. So whenever I make a mistake, I figured that's just one of them. I've got 6 more to go." And that kind of attitude, breeds winning. For Guldahl, I don't know what the catalyst was in 1935, 36, but whatever it was, it certainly worked for him.
It sure did. And he had a pretty cool demeanor on the golf course. I read where Sam Snead said if Ralph gave someone a blood transfusion, the patient would freeze to death. What was the meaning behind that?
Yeah, well, a couple of things about that. Again, it's kind of like Nicklaus when he's playing. He's got blinders on. He pays attention to nothing else except his game, and apparently Guldahl was the same way. But on the flip side of that, Guldahl was very aware of the media and the press because, one fellow said, he'd stop between every shot and comb his hair. And Guldahl was really proud of his hair. And when he knew he was going to win before he walked up the 18th fairway, he'd stop, comb the hair on his head. I want to look good for the media.
Yeah, in 37, I read where he did that. As he approached the 18th hole on the final day, he takes the comb out of his pocket, combs his hair, and then says, "I was always proud of my head of hair."
Exactly right. So, so he was very self-aware. Let's put it that way. He was very self-aware, whether it be his game or whether it be his presence or his perception. But he was very proud of his head of hair, that's for sure.
So in 10 years and with some time off, he wins 16 tournaments and then he walks away. I just can't wrap my head around that. How do you do that, and why did he do that?
Well, I think the way he could do that at that particular time was the advent of World War II. because in 1940 the amount of tournaments that one could play were hugely diminished because wartime. He made the Ryder Cup, 37, 39, 41, but he only played in one, 1937, and he won both of his matches, by the way. But there was no Ryder Cup in 39, and there was no Ryder Cup in 41. So the opportunities to play high-level competition just didn't exist, and they didn't exist again until 1945, really. And so during that time, he stopped playing, and he just felt rusty. And when you're away from the game for that long, I don't think he was motivated to come back.
What did he do after he played?
He became a club pro.
Do you think he ever regretted giving it up?
I haven't read that he did. I think he was pretty content with his life, after World War II. And I know in 1961 he became the club pro at Braemar Country Club out in California, and he stayed there until he died.
Did he ever make appearances back out on tour after he finished playing regularly?
Very briefly in 1949, and I think at that time he just felt like he couldn't compete with these guys. Because you got to remember, by 1949, we're talking Hogan, Snead, and Nelson are definitely the household names. And since he had laid off for so long, I think he just felt he couldn't play to that level again. So he gave it up completely in 1949. But you might as well say that really 1940 was his last year.
To you, what's the most fascinating thing about Ralph Guldahl, and what makes him a Hall of Fame golfer?
Well, besides his outstanding career, albeit brief career, the fact that he could come back. He starts out as a 19-year-old. He wins. He wins for a couple of years in a row, and then the ability to walk away whether it's frustration or his son or the combination of all these things, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't making the money out on the tour, which at that time they didn't make any money. It was a hard life.
Yeah.
But the ability to walk away and then turn right around and come back in the fashion that he did, and then at the top of his game, everybody talks about how he lost his game, which he did. Again, I think it was paralysis by analysis. Personally, I think he tried to correct his natural swing, and that just didn't work for him. But to make the decision to walk away when you've won and you've been on a winning streak for these 4 years in a row, just to say that's it, I'm done. That I think is amazing.
Is there a golfer today that fans can watch who you could say, if you watch this guy play, that's who Ralph Guldahl, or that person emulates Ralph Guldahl the best?
Well, I'd have to think about that for a while, because you've got some guys. Some of my guys today are people like John Rahm. I think there's a comparison right there. John Rahm, again, 19, 20 years old, comes out and makes an impression immediately. And maybe, again, like Ralph Guldahl, Rahm expresses his emotions when he's really frustrated or mad. If he can get that under control, I think we'll see a lot of major championships out of this guy. So far as swing goes, I don't know. So far as the game goes, you've got the names that everybody bandies about, Jordan Spieth, Jason Day, Ricky Fowler. But again, I keep Rory McIlroy in there. I keep John Rahm in there. I think, I'll tell you who I think can kind of fit into that mode a bit is Sergio Garcia. Yeah.
And there's a little bit of flamboyance there, too.
There is, yeah. Yeah, there is that. But Sergio, I think to me, and when he was younger, in his early days, when people had the high expectations for him on everything, I think he had one of the best games in golf. And he just didn't reach his potential. And then you don't hear from him for a little while, and now he's back.
Right.
And of course, I think the wife and the family now have something to do with that as well.
Sure.
Calmed him down a little bit. But yeah, I think I could almost put Sergio into that mix.
What about the other golfers on tour during Ralph's time? What did they say about him? What did they think about him?
Well, Snead was a fan, mainly because Guldahl beat him in the majors, But no, I think Sam Snead was a big fan of Guldahl. The others, you don't hear a whole lot of comments from them because, a lot of them don't talk about fellow players, either positive or negative, unless they just beat them in a tournament, which Sam did. Mm-hmm. But I think all in all, again, such a brief period of time. I mean, I can think back of when I was living in Scotland, there's a couple of guys that were great amateurs that had extremely high expectations when they turned pro, and they just faded away. And nobody even knows their name anymore.
Right.
And so Ralph when he made his presence known from 36 to 40, everybody knew him. But then he's gone.
And that period of time, he was about as good as there was. I mean, it's really hard. Yeah, sure. Take away Tiger, Nicklaus, and especially Nelson, who won 11 in a row, 18 in 1 year. That 4-year period is a pretty tough period to repeat as far as wins are concerned. Very few golfers have played at that kind of level like Ralph did.
That's right. I mean, the only one I can think of right off the top of my head, believe it or not, is a female, Nancy Lopez.
Wow. I
mean, Nancy, when her rookie year, she won 9, 5 in a row. And then in her second year, she won 8. So there's 17 wins in 2 years for her. And that's pretty similar to Ralph Guldahl. Although Nancy did stay around for a while and ended up with 48 wins.
Right.
But yeah, her first appearance when she was on 9 wins and followed by 8 wins. Well, for Ralph, that's pretty much the same thing. When he was on his game, for 2-3 years, I would imagine that some of the pros were coming in saying, "Oh, is Ralph playing here? I don't know what our chances are." And I think it's kind of like Hagen, when he says when he showed up and he would say, "All right, who's coming in second today?" Maybe that attitude was among some of the players saying, "Oh, Ralph's here and he's on his game. Who's coming in second today?"
Wow. Well, he's certainly a great golfer, obviously a Hall of Fame golfer. Tony, I want to thank you again for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I wish more fans of golf would make the trip to St. Augustine and the World Golf Hall of Fame and Museum. Tony, thank you so much.
Always glad to help, man. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you. Golf is littered with greats we rarely speak of. Olin Dutra, whom we briefly talked about, won a U.S. Open and a PGA, yet so few remember him. Another great we mentioned was Lawson Little, who won 2 PGA championships. These guys were not one-hit wonders, and neither was Ralph. The guy could flat out play. How he could walk away from the game and he was still winning like he was, well, it's just amazing to me. But throughout history, guys at the top of their game have done it before. One of the more famous, of course, was Barry Sanders from the Detroit Lions. We can only wonder what might have been. How many more wins could Ralph have had? Well, with Snead in his prime and Nelson and Hogan taking center stage, it's hard to tell. But one thing is for sure. During the stretch of 1936 through 1940, when Ralph won 13 tournaments, including 3 majors and 3 Western Opens, you'd be hard-pressed to find many others who dominated the game in such a short period of time like Ralph Guldahl. Next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to talk about a career of a baseball player that had just begun. A career that was heading for superstardom when tragedy struck and cut short a life way too soon. The story of Lyman Bostic. That's next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes. Thank you again to today's guest, Tony Parker, and we'll see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagorski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s. Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports. Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories. And Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.